Hey gang, Stephen Marshall, KYLandlordlaw.com, back with another update. I haven't had much good news to share on the housing front over the last year, but I'm bringing the positivity today, and we're going to start talking about the CARES Act. As you'll remember, last spring, Congress passed the CARES Act as part of its first wave of COVID-19 relief. And the CARES Act covered any property that participated in a federal government program. It didn't apply to all properties, but only those that participated in a federal government program or had a loan that was backed by the federal government. And at those properties, it created an eviction moratorium, it prohibited late fees, and it created this requirement that landlords at those properties had to give a 30-day notice to pay or vacate once its eviction moratorium ended on July the 25th. However, after the CARES Act expired, the Kentucky Supreme Court passed a number of orders affecting the entire state that required landlords at CARES Act properties to continue to give 30-day notices to pay or vacate. In addition, every eviction filing, regardless of the type of property, had to include a verification of compliance form that verified whether the property was covered by the CARES Act or not. Well, the good news for today is starting April the 1st, those requirements are going away. The Kentucky Supreme Court issued an order on February 26th that allows evictions to proceed throughout the state without regard to the CARES Act. So you no longer have to do any searches to find out if your property is covered or not, because they're allowing eviction filings without regard to CARES Act status. That means you no longer have to fill out that AOC 1027 form, the verification of compliance form. And that all starts April 1st of this year. You may go back to giving your usual notice to pay or vacate regardless of what type of property you have, whether you were covered by the CARES Act or not. And just by way of review, if you're not in a URLTA area, a Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act area, you may still have to give a 30-day notice to pay or vacate. If you're not sure if your area is covered by the URLTA, go to the post that accompanies this video and click on a link, and you can see the 19 cities and counties in Kentucky that are covered. In non-URLTA areas, unless your lease specifies that you may give a different notice, 30 days notice is still likely going to be required by your local eviction court. But if you're in a URLTA area, you may give a 7-day notice to pay or vacate unless your lease requires some additional notice, and that's rare. So, CARES Act is gone. Courts no longer are going to care about that. Second piece of good news, a blow against the Cdc Eviction Moratorium. Earlier this year, a federal district court in northern Georgia issued an opinion that the CDC had constitutional authority for its moratorium on evictions, which is still in place right now, at least through March 31st and probably longer. However, on February the 25th, a federal district court in Texas ruled otherwise, holding that the CDC had no constitutional authority for its eviction moratorium. So that is certainly good news, but the question is, what's it mean for us in Kentucky right now? Well, right now it doesn't mean much. It's likely that the government will appeal the Texas ruling up to a federal circuit court. But the good news is that it means that it's more likely that we're going to hear something from the U.S. Supreme Court at some point on the CDC eviction moratorium. The U.S. Supreme Court is much more likely to hear a case if we have a split between two different federal courts, and we have that now. The federal court in northern Georgia saying that the CDC moratorium is constitutional, the federal court in eastern Texas saying that it's not. And so hopefully this case will move up the chain fairly quickly and the U.S. Supreme Court will weigh in on the issue. The thing to remember, regardless of what the Supreme Court says, this would only prohibit a federal nationwide eviction moratorium like the CDC has instituted. It would not prohibit each state or local government from instituting its own eviction moratorium. And for that reason, we have some new state legislation that is very important, and that's Senate Bill 264. This is a fairly new bill that's been filed, and what it does is amends KRS 39A, which outlines the governor's powers during a state of emergency. Because if you'll remember, last spring, Governor Beshear issued a statewide eviction moratorium. Well, this bill would limit the governor's powers during a state of emergency. And it makes clear specifically that the governor has no emergency power to prevent or impose other restrictions on evictions or foreclosures for non-payment of rent. Okay, Senate Bill 264. It's currently sitting in a Senate committee, so something to keep an eye on to see if it moves forward here during the last part of this legislative session. It would be a very important piece of legislation if the Supreme Court does rule that the federal government has no constitutional basis to prohibit evictions nationwide. And then the last topic I want to talk about today is rental assistance. As most of you know, at this point, Kentucky's getting a little over $296 million in rental assistance. The details of that money being distributed is that it's going to go through 3 separate programs depending on where you're located. Fayette County residents, you're going to apply at covid19renterhelp.org. Jefferson County residents will apply at stopmyeviction.org. And then everyone else, residents of the 118 other counties, are going to apply through the Healthy at Home Eviction Relief Fund, found at teamkyherf.ky.gov. And I'll have links to all those sites. They're actually on the front page of my website, and they'll be in the blog post that accompanies this video. The funds have the same criteria no matter where you are, and they're going to pay up to 12 months of back rent and 3 months of future rent for all tenants that qualify. So good news on the rental assistance money, ton of money out there. You should be able to get paid. The real value in filing evictions right now is to force your tenant to seek rental assistance through one of these funds. So if you're trying to decide whether to file an eviction on your tenant, if you believe that they'll go ahead and cooperate with the assistance programs, you probably don't need to file. But if you think that they're not going to participate until you force them to, then an eviction filing will force them to do that, as the courts will require it. And then the last thing on evictions, on rental assistance, we have a new legislative bill, House Bill 570, that would create an emergency rental assistance fund of $5 million for the state that can be used to help landlords or tenants anytime a state of emergency exists for more than 30 days and evictions are temporarily ceased as a result of the emergency. So anytime those two things happen, a state of emergency that lasts for more than 30 days, and in response to the state of emergency, the state suspends your ability to evict tenants, then this fund would be created with $5 million in it in rental assistance to help landlords and tenants. That bill, it's House Bill 570, again, currently sitting in a House committee. We'll see if it moves forward. I do encourage you to reach out to your local legislators, your representative and your senator, and encourage them to support House Bill 570 and Senate Bill 264. In the post that accompanies this video, I'll have a link where you can search for your legislators so that you can send them an email or give them a phone call. Okay, so lots of good news today. The CARES Act is gone, a blow against the Cdc Eviction Moratorium, and lots of rental assistance. So all good news today. That's a great way to start March. I hope the month is full of peace and prosperity for you and your family and your team. If you need anything from me, you know where to reach me, 859-685-0035 or smarshall@trippleslaw.com. Hope you're doing well. Have a great rest of your week.